Well, I think the question is really has to be tied to the future of African people in the world, because you can't disconnect the presence of African people here in the United States and without connecting it to the conditions that people face throughout the world, but specifically here in the United States. Uh, the African population is still challenged with the recapturing of the African mind. We had some successes coming out of the 1960s in an effort to recapture who we were as a people, moving away from our designated nomenclature given to us by the system of white supremacy that caused us to become Negroes. But the period of the 1960s had a tremendous impact, and we began to develop a consciousness related to what was called the Black Consciousness Movement, and are beginning to identify with being African and relating to the continent of Africa. This was an extremely important period in our history when songs came into being like Say It Loud, Black and I'm Proud, Nina Simone, I'm Young, Gifted, and Black. And so we went through this whole period of re-identifying with being African. And at this moment in history, it appears that we are getting away from the racial consciousness that is so important for our survival. No group inside of America, or in fact in the world, but particularly here in this country, has been successful without its relationship to its ethnic identity. The Italians, the Irish, the Jewish people, the Polish people, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so there's been a big push to take black people away from themselves when we were moving toward ourselves. Now the push is to move us away from ourselves. You're an individual. You're not connected to your race. You're in a post-racial society because you've elected a black president to sit in the White House in the United States. The fact of the matter is, we can't knock having achieved that accomplishment, because you will be knocking your grandparents, your great-grandparents. But we must understand what that means to us as a people in relationship to the continued condition. So the question is, what is the future for black people? What is the future for African Americans? And I think the future always has to be deemed bright, because our ancestors are so deeply entwined in our spirits. It just hasn't bust loose yet. And when we look back in history, we've had movements that broke loose because something happened. I don't know what will happen to cause us to bust loose once again, but we can never, never, never give up the struggle for the liberation of black people in this country. So there are pockets all around. There are cells all around. There are cadres all around. It's just that movements have a way of going up to the peak, which occurred in our movement, both the civil rights and its transition to the human rights, to the black power phase of our movement. And now our movement has reached what we call a lull, L-U-L-L. We're all the way down. We don't have any spirit. We don't think we can do anything. We look to some single individual leader to solve us. And none of our successful movements in this country that have impacted on public policy, that have jolted us, that have made some advancements on behalf of our race, have occurred through some individual leader. They've occurred through movements when the masses moved out, led by sophisticated organizing that took place within our communities, and we have to come back to that. So I think the future is bright, although it looks dim. And we have too many young people among us that have the spirit. It's just a question of the elders connecting with this. We have what we would call a generational disconnect, where we have to reconnect with our young people. These young people out here, these are our people. and we can't abandon them no matter what their behavior is. And so there needs to be this effort to reconnect and rebuild the Black liberation movement in America. So that's why, and I think that it will be done, it must be done. And so I say the future for African people in this country is bright, despite all of the challenges that we see and the things that we do to each other that cause us to despair.
But Dr. Worrill, let me ask real quick that do you think that after Barack Obama, our President Obama leaves the White House, and we and African Americans say, wow, we had a African American president for 8 years, 4 years, 8 years, and things haven't really changed. Will that get us to re-examine our Africanness?
Well, I think even before we got to the White House, you could say that we had almost 10,000 black elected officials in America, and the conditions of our people. We can forget about Obama being in the White House. Prior to his ascendancy to the White House, the idea was that if we elected more black people that looked like us to elective office, to local political office, to mayors in America, to state reps, state senators, to congressmen, and et cetera, and county offices all throughout the country, that our condition would improve. And obviously, even before Obama, we know that was not happening. So the number of black elected officials commensurate with the power, the acquisition of power to change our condition has not occurred. So we don't even have to relate to the Obama phenomenon. It was not happening prior to Obama, and it probably will not happen. So we cannot see self-determination. We got to go back and really look at Malcolm. We have to go back and look at these two streams of struggle in our country, the 175, 80-year battle for whether or not we should fight to become a part of America, to assimilate in America, to be great Americans, to love America, to become a part of America. This Frederick Douglass stream, and it's been an important stream, and some black people have pursued those ideas, but there's also been another stream, the stream for independence, the stream for self-determination, the stream to repatriate the Africa, the stream to find black towns and create our own space inside of America, the stream for self-determination and independence around our own interests as a people. So these two streams still exist today, right now, in the midst. We still have these ideas before us, the struggle to assimilate, to become a part of America, to say I love America, to be a patriot for America, versus this other stream that struggles for self-determination, black liberation, and independence. And although it is not discussed as it was in another period in time where we boldly declared that we were struggling for black liberation and independence, but there are still many among us who are still struggling for black liberation and independence, where we determine for ourselves our own destiny, what's in our best interest, despite any elected officials. See, elected officials are there because we put them there. We elect them to these offices, but we're not organized as a community to make them do what they're supposed to do. So elected officials get in office and think that they can do what they want to do because the African community in this country has not organized ourselves. We get involved in campaigns and mass movements around some phenomenon in electoral politics, but then when the election is over with, we don't have an organization to hold the elected official accountable. So there are a multiplicity of challenges among us, but the struggle for black liberation is more needed now than any other time in our history.